also wins the Electoral College vote. But like 3 times in American history, someone who actually lost the popular vote ended up president anyway. The first was in 1876, when there was a total of 369 electoral votes available, with 185 needed to win. Now this bearded fellow that you see here, Republican Rutherford B. Hayes, with 4,036,298 popular votes, won 185 electoral votes. But his main opponent, Democrat Samuel J. Tilden, won the popular vote with 4,300,590 votes. But the problem was he won only 184 electoral votes. So Hayes was elected president. Now it happened again in 1888 when Republican Benjamin Harrison won 233 electoral votes. Now even though Democrat Grover Cleveland won the popular vote but got only 168 electoral votes. And of course, most famous of all, and this only seems to happen when Republicans are in danger, was in 2000 when George W. Bush won 271 electoral votes, even though Al Gore, Democrat, won the popular vote but won only 266 electoral votes. If you remember, it was the electoral votes of Florida that clinched the deal. Now, Joseph Ellis in a Wall Street Journal article also says that there have been occasions when candidates were elected president with less than 50% of the national vote. Why is this important? Because in the Electoral College, you have to have more than 50% or at least 50%. And yet you can still get more than 50% or 50%, but still not get 50% of the popular votes, as if it could get even more confusing. Anyway, according to Ellis, this happened at least 7 times in the 19th century and 3 times in the 20th century. In 1912, when Woodrow Wilson won a 3-cornered fight. In 1968, with Nixon's victory. And in 1992, when Bill Clinton won. But in each case, they won the required majority, as we pointed out, in the Electoral College. So how does this happen? How can you win a plurality, though not get 50% of the popular vote, and still get the constitutionally ordained over 50% of the Electoral College vote? Now, take a look at this chart from About.com. Here it is on the TV. Okay, so you need 270 votes in the Electoral College to get a majority and become president. Now, since 11 of the 12 states in this chart accounts for exactly 270 votes, a candidate could win these states and only these states on your screen, lose the other 39 states in the United States, and still be elected president. Now, some Americans taking a look at this political math ask if this is fair. Now, Joseph Ellis again, in an essay titled "A Dinosaur Worth Saving," had this to say. The Electoral College was and is an odd improvisation. But Jackie, please read what he wrote.
The Electoral College was a messy alternative to selection of the president by the Senate. Hardly a product of divine inspiration, it represented a compromise between nationalists and states' writers, northerners and southerners, advocates of a strong and weak executive. Most of the framers presumed that the Electoral College would only winnow down the last of presidential candidates, not make the final choice, which would be decided by the House of Representatives.
But as we've seen, it hasn't worked out that way except twice in the 1800s. Instead, it's helped mirror what the electorate really wants. Yet oddly enough, it seems to work not because it mirrors public opinion all the time, but because it provides a mechanism for electing the chief executive when the public proves incapable of conferring a majority on any single candidate. Now, this is Ellis's argument, Jackie.
The major impact of the Electoral College has been to produce decisive electoral conclusions even when the popular vote is evenly split, and most especially when third-party candidacies prevent any one person from garnering a popular majority.
And yet Americans themselves have proposed time and again to do away with the Electoral College as anachronistic and elitist. So when we return, we'll discuss 3 things: how the Electoral College math might play out, whether Americans really want to get rid of it, and whether it's a model for presidential elections anywhere else in the world.
Books featured by The Explainer are available on shelves or on order at a different bookstore.
Joining us tonight is attorney Jemmy Gatdula, a columnist and blogger, and familiar guest to you, all of you. Now, we have questions from the floor right away.
Yes, Manolo. Vince here has a question.
Since ang pinagbabasihan niyo is electoral vote, ba't pa kailangan natin ng popularity vote? Ba't pa kailangan dalawa, di ba?
Well, because kung would you like?
No, go
okay.
ahead.
Kung titingnan natin kung saan nagsimula yung sistema nila, dati ayaw nga nilang iboto ng tao yung presidente. So paano ka makakahanap ng paraan kung paano mabobola mo yung tao na, kayong pipili, kaya lang talaga kami yung pipili. Ang ginawa nila, yung legislatura, kunyari ang bawat state doon, di ba, meron silang Congress or state legislature, pipili sila ng mga boboto. But dinesign din nila na yung mga bobotong yun, hindi talaga makakahanap ng kandidato na mananalo. In the first place, hindi man lang sila pwede mag-meet na sama-sama, di ba? Kung nakita mo yung sistema nila hanggang ngayon, hanggang sa kapitolyo lang ng probinsya. Tapos, boboto na lang ng probinsya, tapos papadala sa kongreso, tapos doon nila bibilangin. Now, what's happened is, over the years, as things changed, dinidemanda na ng tao, bakit kayong nandun sa kapitolyo ang pumipili? Dapat kami ang pipili. So, sinabi ng mga state legislatures, sige, kung sino ang binoto ninyo, itong mga nagpipresenta bilang electors, yun ang iboboto nila. So, technically, nandun pa yung appearance of the system, which is very British and American. Sa kanila, hindi nila pinapalit yung sistema habang mahanap kaya mo pang iritoke. So, gagawin nila, nandun pa rin yung sinaunang sistema but with modifications.
Manolo, we have a question from one of our home viewers, the boy. He asked, what prevents U.S. President and Vice President from coming from different parties today?
You only vote for one slate. You don't, although technically the electors will vote for a president or a vice president, if you go to the very beginning where the electorate themselves cast their vote, you do not vote separately for president or vice president the way we do. In the United States, you have to vote slate A or slate B, or if there's a third party, slate C. So from the very start, that limits the choices.
Or perhaps the short answer to that question would be, well, because the law said so, that they should actually vote for a president and vice president, the same thing. If I could add to the question earlier, I think one thing na isipin nyo is yung sinabi ni Ellis kanina, he used the word compromise. And actually, when you look at the U.S. Constitution, it is really a series of compromises done that for some reason worked. There were a lot of struggles that were posed around, number one, yung monarchical tradition vis-a-vis the democratic form of presidential type of government that they want. Secondly would be the feudal type of lawmakers that they had, but at the same time they wanted to be democratic. And the Electoral College was essentially that. And they wanted to be democratic, but at the same time wala silang tiwala, so they wanted to give it to a series of, or a group of people daw, who could be able to discern properly yung qualifications of that person and what have you. And it would be, theoretically, it would be these people who would choose the president. But as Manolo said, through time, the people became a little bit more cognizant of their rights, and they started grabbing more and more. But that essentially is the reason why we had that electoral college system.
For example, if you look at many of these accounts, Ellis or McCullough or others, the way the Americans who were writing their constitution viewed it was, okay, you have your neighbors who are farmers, shoemakers, people who never went to school. Are they going to pick the President of the United States? You should be one of us if you're George Washington, right? So how do we do it so they don't get mad? So we come out this thing where, okay, well, if they vote for their congressman, okay lang, because kilala naman nila yung congressman, and more likely than not, the guy who has the money, the prestige, and everything in the district will win anyway, and he's one of us. So that's the way they kept limiting it. At the same time, they also designed the Electoral College with the idea that if you read many of the accounts, that it's actually a search committee. If you notice, they designed it so that each state basically has to choose their best guy, so their